Great.
Perfect. Perfectly
Excellent.
the screen.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Amir, and I'm very happy to be here and to share with you a few minutes about entrepreneurial ecosystem building. Uh, so a little bit about me. I'm originally from Israel, and that's where I'm based right now. Also, I've been living and working in France for 3 years and Boston for almost 20 years. First part of my career has been on the startup, going to scale up, going to large corporation after the acquisition, and it's been global. And then on the second part, I worked at the macro level doing global ecosystem building, where the top ecosystem that I'm involved is are Israel, Boston, and Switzerland, and then some others. My activity is mostly around deep tech with clients in semiconductors, chemistry, etc. And then, as I said, the interesting project that I did recently is with the Switzerland Innovation Park in Novare, which is a deep tech innovation hub with multiple centers of excellence, connecting a few elements of the ecosystem together, which is the time to talk about entrepreneurial ecosystem. It is typically defined in a large metropolitan area or sometimes in a region or in a small country. And the definition is quite similar among many people. This one I'm mostly influenced by the model developed at MIT Sloan Business School. And the main five pillars are startups, risk capital, research, government, and large corporation. What's really important is the engine that connects everything, which is more kind of a soft element, not easily defined. But again, this is the ecosystem, the five pillars, and the engine that connects them. And I think it's important, even though most of us talk about innovation, it's not really about innovation, it's about the ecosystem. And we need to take care about all the five elements, all the five pillars, because if we don't take care of one, it really becomes the weakest link and could have the potential to drag the whole ecosystem down. The engine could be different. It could be a vision of specific people. It could be people that are connecting together with common denominators and common grounds. It could be culture and maybe potentially others. And the ecosystem strength is directly related to the strength of the engine and the glue that connects everything together. The government is typically the most important player in building and developing a specific ecosystem. The main interest of the government is typically job creation and attracting foreign investment into their region, into the area that they govern. And the task is fairly simple, is to move the ecosystem to the next level. What I learned from my experience is that you have to differentiate between two types of activities. I believe that the most successful ecosystem that were able to go from one level to the next level have done it with a few, maybe one, maybe more, high impact initiatives, where the high impact initiatives is the one that plants a beachhead, an arrowhead in the next level. And then there are quite a few infrastructure and build-up activities that help the government and help the players to keep it at the next level and prevent it from falling down to the previous level. So again, a combination of two types of activities where what's really important is the high impact initiative. The key success factors in my experience is number one, to find the right combination between a critical mass and a sector-specific focus. Critical mass is extremely important. It's like when you build a shopping mall or do any other commercial activity, you must assure a critical mass. So you can do a critical mass by connecting a few elements together, working on a few sectors, etc. But then everything is diluted. So then you have to be focused on a specific sector. Sometimes it could be more than one sector. But then you have to find the right balance. You don't want to be narrow and you don't want to be too wide, and you have to find the right balance. Of course, like in every commercial activity, you have to assure a continuous upward momentum. It doesn't have to be a steep momentum, but it has to be continuous, and of course, it has to be upward. The third element is really to take a competitive approach. Now, when you work with government, Government are not corporations. They are not used to think about competition. They think about incentives, they think about budget, they think about how to develop the region. But the truth is very simple. When a government wants to attract talent, when they want to attract investment, and when they want to create job, they are competing with others because talent and investment can go everywhere. So I think it's very important for a government to take a competitive approach, even though sometimes it takes a collaborative perspective. Like we know in every commercial company, sometimes you hardly compete with your competitors, and sometimes you find a way to collaborate with them. So taking a balanced, competitive and collaborative attitude, especially for governments that are not used to, is very important. Not to mention the global approach. The global approach is extremely important. You cannot stay contained in your own. You have to open up to the world. And that's the way you change really the zero-sum game because, every country wants to do the same. So if you don't take a global approach, you stick to the zero-sum game and it's very difficult to create a change. And last but not least is to make sure that you have at least the right two people to stand behind the ecosystem development. The number one is the champion, is the person that is senior, even though it's not the top level person, a senior guy, man or woman, of course, that knows the art of ecosystem building, is passionate about it, and want to make a change. You want to take a risk, but you have to combine it with the top blessing from the top, whether it's the governor of the region or the ministry or whatever it is, the one that control the budget, the one that make sure that things are going to happen. And you need a combination of the champion and the top blessing in order to make it happen. I've seen many situations where you had a clear champion, but the champion has to fight their own way up, and they were not successful to get the top blessing in time rather than from the beginning. And the government perspective is always initiate, observe, encourage, and support different type of activities, different perspective. So that's the government perspective. I see that I've taken already 7 minutes of your time, so I'll try to make it shorter. There is the large corporation perspective. Their task is new markets, new customer, and assure market leadership. The one thing I can say here is that I can recommend a very good book that was written by Professor Gary Pisano from Harvard Business School. It's called Creative Construction. And one of the great charts that he has created, and you can see it here, is basically the different types of innovation for a large corporation. The axis are existing or new business model, and the second axis is existing or new technical capabilities. Based on that, we have the famous 2x2 matrix that defines different type of innovation: routine, radical, disruptive, and architecture. And the key success factor actually are not that different from the government perspective. What large corporations have to fight very strongly is the tendency of different business unit managers to the NIH syndrome, so not invented here. So you have to fight very hard in order to make sure that open innovation can play a part in the large corporation. There is the university and research perspective. Universities still are used to think in terms of technology transfer, but we, as ecosystem builders, we know that we need to talk about the new technology transfer. And it's not about commercialization, but it's really how the university is playing a part, sometimes as a governance proxy in the overall ecosystem building. And that's the right way for the university to leave the old paradigm of technology transfer and go to the next stage. Altogether, I believe that in order to build a strong and permanent entrepreneurial ecosystem, you need to take a holistic ecosystem approach. You need to find a balance between critical mass and sector focus. You must assure global connectivity, obviously a continuous upward momentum, which leads to resource allocation criteria. You have to allocate your resources accordingly. It's some part of it goes to infrastructure versus high impact initiative. You need to make sure that not too much of your resources are going to non-discretionary elements such as salaries and people, and you need to allocate a significant part to discretionary activity. The combination to, you know, how to, when to initiate, when to observe, when to encourage, and when to support activity. And not less important is to make sure that you have an iterative feedback loop. You start with strategy, go to planning, go to execution, and then a feedback loop back to the strategy, because we are in the domain of innovation. What was written yesterday is already not true today. Just on a personal note, my recent activity was with Switzerland Innovation Park in Novare, where we connected the Canton of Aargau, the Paul Scherrer Institute, and a large corporation from Netherlands called VDL in the specific cases, but many others. And it was a good case study in supporting all the 5 pillars of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Thank you for your time and listening, and this is my contact information.
Sorry, thank you, Amir. Thank you so much. My mic was muted. I think we will have time in the end to have some questions and debates about things. So I think we'll leave it like now. So let's continue with Sandra. Are you ready? Yes, you are. Perfect. I see your screen.
Okay, great. So I'm actually gonna talk about being a researcher and going to the entrepreneurial path, and a bit of the things that you need to unlearn. And I think this is a kind of great way to keep in mind as well as a venture builder, because currently I'm a venture builder at KTH, and I'm helping researchers to start thinking more in an entrepreneurial way. So these are like constantly in my mind now, but it's really from my own from my own experience. So what made me first jump the ship? Like why did I choose to become an entrepreneur instead of a researcher? So here's 2 images. So one is from a scientific conference where you have loads and loads and loads of posters, scientific breakthroughs, and so forth. And the other image is from Slush. So that's a startup conference in Helsinki. And when I did my postdoc, I had an opportunity to pitch my postdoc project at Slush. And that's really when I kind of realized that I like the pace, I like the sense of urgency, I like pushing things quicker. So that's what then made me go on to that entrepreneurial path. So my background is I have a biochemistry master's from Finland, then I have a PhD in cancer genetics from Norway, and then I did a postdoc at Karolinska Institute here in Stockholm. And in 2018, I won this pitching competition. This took me to join the first startup from KTH. It wasn't within my field, but it was just a way to start trying the entrepreneurial part. So this startup was then part also of different incubators here in Stockholm, so amongst them Sting. But in 2020, I also then got an opportunity, thanks to my pitch, a French group, research group actually connected with me. And then in 2020, in the autumn, I joined, or I co-founded a startup in Paris. So it was the pandemic. So the first year I worked from Sweden, but then we moved with my whole family. With this startup, we also went to accelerators. So we also went to Berkeley Skydeck and then Future for Care in Paris, and amongst others. A year ago, I moved back with my family, and then I joined KTH as a venture builder. And what have I learned? So one main thing is that actually the path from being a researcher to going to entrepreneurship is not so strange, because you do it kind of based on the same things. As a researcher, you have an idea and you need to convince someone to get funding. So normally you write a grant proposal. And if you get the grant proposal, then you need to execute on that idea. And then basically you have a peer-reviewed paper as the goal. And then you have new projects. Whereas as an entrepreneur, you also have an idea, hopefully. And then you need to convince someone also to give you funding. And then you might need to hire a team if you don't have it already. And then you need to execute. Instead of having the peer-reviewed paper, here it's hitting the milestones or having the minimal viable product. And the biggest difference is that within research, then you can get along and you can start exploring new topics. Whereas as an entrepreneur, you actually use all your efforts to make this one idea more robust and more solid and really improving that product. So when you look for funding, it's for the same project. So I think that's maybe the biggest differentiator. But what is then crucial? So in entrepreneurship, as I mean, people here know, so ideas are nothing without execution. Many people can have ideas, but if you don't execute, nothing happens. And I think this is absolutely the core essence of a startup. And also you need to have a sense of urgency. So in academia, it's easy to be like thinking about in half a year time, we will figure this thing out. Whereas in a startup, it's more urgent like that. Normally, you don't have funding for that long time, and you can't wait because you already have the next thing that needs to be developed. So it's better to have something done than to have it perfect. And this is something that is you need to learn. I think quite many academics need to learn that it can't be perfect. You need to release the product before. And then again about the execution. So as a researcher, you tend to look for maybe not always the cheapest solutions, but there is a very steep learning curve. And as a researcher, you tend to have this feeling that I can figure it out myself. And if someone else can do it, I can do it also. And why wouldn't I do it better? You really don't have time for this in a startup. So I don't think you have time for DIY projects, but you need to focus on your expertise. And then you bring in expertise on those topics that you are not maybe excelling so well. Either you bring them in as advisors or then you bring them in on the team. That depends, of course, of the need. And then another thing that I also recently had a discussion upon in KTH in this venture building program is about ownership. So it's easy to think if you have an IP that then you should own a big part of the company. But the thing is that the IP is only the first stepping stone into being able to create a robust startup. So it's important to remember that the path from IP is quite often quite long, especially in deep tech and life science. So the operational team really needs to have a bigger part than I think one as a researcher is aware of. And it's also better to own a small part of something that becomes big than to own a lot of something that doesn't turn out into something. And then the difference is also that not all money is good money. So in research, you can basically apply for money and grants from anywhere because you need money and then you're allowed to execute as you want to. Whereas in a startup, then it's really about the person fit as well. So if you don't get along with your investors, it's not going to be so easy to execute. So it's really important to remember to do the due diligence both ways. It's both the investors doing it on the startups, but it's also the startup doing it on the investors, because you will interact for a long time. So then it's good to be aligned on the vision and mission. And then what comes to networks? So as a researcher, you can, probably it's not good, but you can quite often work in a silo. You can do quite a lot of by yourself and still publish. But in a startup, like as you're developing something that you want to sell, you want to have customers, you really need to work on your network, because when it comes to it, you actually rather buy stuff from someone you know than from a stranger. And here I think accelerators are really good. So incubators and accelerators really serve their purpose for one to expand the network. And then finally, why did I go from entrepreneurship into venture building? So when, as a researcher coming into entrepreneurship, I learned a lot of things the hard way, which also made maybe our company not being in speed that we would have wanted to. And now as a venture builder, I actually get to share all of this experience to help other people avoid those mistakes. And also for the insights. So for me, I think it's really, really interesting to be able to see innovations firsthand before they're even out there. You get to see what is on the plate. And then, as I mentioned, help others succeed. And then also about the building the strong teams, because not all researchers want to become entrepreneurs, but there might be quite a lot of good ideas in academia that could be commercialized. So then it's also about finding the right people at the right time, and then to drive this progress. So making sure that one finds the right pilot customer so that there is actually some external validation of this research. Then it's also to help researchers understand this ownership and funding choices that they have, because I think that's maybe something that might take a toll on a personal note, because it's quite hard to understand how the funding works. And if you don't know that investors would rather see operational members having a bigger chunk of the company, if you don't grasp this, then it's going to be a longer way also to make that story a success. And then also to leverage networks and ecosystems. So of course I have experience from France, so I have quite a vast network there, and we were also quite active in the States. So there I managed to build a network as well, and it would be a pity to let that network go. So then it's really nice to help startups make those connections. And then by being a venture builder, one is able to help several instead of just jumping into one specific startup. One can help several, and it's quite nice to feel that one can make a bigger impact to more people. So yeah, thank you. That was what I wanted to say today.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. Very good. And it's this whole idea of doing this from the inside is quite different from what we're going to talk about that later, I think. So super, thank you, Xavier. Are you prepared?
Yes, I am.
Great, as always.
Hope you can see my screen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but we need present. So there we go. Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. I want to focus on something very useful for deep tech ventures, but quite difficult to understand because there are so many options, and that is really about non-dilutive funding, in particular the ones coming from the different instruments of the European Commission. So we'll try to look through a couple of options and understand how this can fit with the fundraising strategy of a deep tech venture. So that's my main job. This is the reason I'm here. I've been doing this for over 15 years. And in particular, over the 10 years, we've been working together with the program from the European Commission that is called the European Innovation Council, which is a dedicated instrument for deep tech ventures. And so here, what we have to do on a daily basis is develop a fundraising strategy for startups, which are different phases. Sometimes they are very early stage. They've just came out of their research institutes. and all the way to startups that have become scale-ups and now are raising large rounds, B, C, D rounds with 100 million euro plus. And for all of these startups, there is an instrument, different one, of course. So there's a portfolio of instruments that you can look at, which generally includes grant, non-dilutive funding, but more recently has been also including equity investments, because the European Commission is now able to invest funds, capital, via a dedicated vehicle. I will come back to that. And so there's a lot of money at stake. The European Innovation Council had a budget of about 11 billion over the current framework, which is called Horizon Europe. And it is set to triple for the next framework, which will start in 2028. So there is significant money there for deep tech entrepreneurs. How does that fit with the overall funding life cycle? Well, clearly, when you get out of the lab, you will initially receive funding from your lab and maybe some national funding before your tech transfer office helps you to spin out the company and maybe raise your first round, usually with some specialized deep tech investors. And it's only when you have started to go to market and you want to scale that you can access the generalist VC funds, the growth capital. The interesting thing about the government funding is that it comes very early stage. That includes the European Commission funding, and it allows you to bridge that gap, so-called valley of death, between the time where you are just spinning out of your research team and the part where you actually are going to need some external capital. So how does this work? The Commission likes to talk in terms of technology readiness level, TRL, which is a NASA scale, but used widely by the European Commission. So depending on how early you are in that TRL scale, you'll be able to access specific instruments. So typically when you don't have a prototype is TRL 5, and you are looking at the initial concepts, there are instruments from the European Commission like the EIC Pathfinder, which allow you to receive grants up to 3 or 4 million euros as a consortium, so you cannot apply alone. But even if you don't have a product yet. So this is really meant for researchers who are setting up some ideas and want to develop further. Once you have gotten closer to a prototype, there are other programs like EIC Transition, which allow you to start a company and get it funded by the Commission, again, in the range of 2 to 3 million euro of funding available. Once you have a company and you are now past the prototype stage, moving to get to the market, there are other instruments like the EIC Accelerator, which will allow you to do this. And here the money, of course, is bigger. Typically, you can ask for up to 10 million euro in equity, plus also the grant, which will essentially help you to reach the market. But for deep tech, you might need a lot more money to reach the market, because if you're building a quantum computer, you probably won't be able to do it with 12.5 million euro. So this is why there are other instruments. This year, the EIC launched what they call Step Scale Up, which is a program for strategic technologies, where they are able to invest up to 30 million euro of capital, 30, provided that you are raising a significant round between 50 and 150 million. So as you can see, there's all kinds of instruments which cover the life cycle of the company. And this is only the AC part I've described, because obviously the European programs are much bigger. Horizon Europe is about 90 billion. And so the remaining 80 billion or so are funded or are funding other instruments. Some are focusing on decarbonation, like the Innovation Fund. Some are focusing on collaborative research, so you can apply to these programs as a consortium. And here you don't need to be a startup or a research organization. You can also be a government entity or a large corporate, because obviously these consortium are made of all kinds of organizations. And finally, of course, there is a private fundraising track. So at some point, you will have to raise some private money, because you will not do everything just with grants. And sometimes the programs will require you to raise private money. So for example, if you are applying to the EIC Accelerator and asking for equity from the European Commission, then you will need to have a lead investor in place so that the Commission can co-invest, because currently the European Commission is not allowed to invest as the lead. It has to follow an existing investor. That's for the equity part. Of course, for the grant part, there is no such requirement. The grant is given as soon as you have passed the evaluation filters. So how do you pass these evaluation filters? Well, I mean, two things you need to know is the technology readiness level. That's really the main criteria. So when you are starting to apply to the instruments, the classic mistake is to apply to an instrument where you're too early to apply, so you have no chance of success, or you're too late to apply, so you're not in scope. And that really requires to look at the details of the call to understand if the company is at the right stage of development to be able to claim that kind of funding. You also need to understand how the program, the EU program, work. It's currently organized in 3 pillars. Will probably remain the same on the next framework. Pillar 1 is a pillar focusing on researchers. So this is really something for individual researchers. It's probably heard of it, the European Research Council and the Marie Curie Actions. Pillar 2 is the collaborative program, where you are building a consortium in addressing different societal challenges. And there are work programs which are prescriptive. So for each of these topics, health or security or digital, there will be 100 or more call for proposals with specific topics that you want to address with a specific consortium. That's the other way to get some funding. And finally, the one which is the most interesting when you are building a startup is Pillar 3, which focuses on innovation, in particular deep tech innovation with the European Innovation Council. So what we're looking at now is Pillar 3, as I said, currently 11 billion euro for this framework program, and probably around 34 billion euro that will be allocated to that program, so a significant amount. How does it look like on a yearly basis? Here we can see the budget for 2025. You can see that there is a budget for Pathfinder, 262 million, a budget for transition, 98 million, and a large budget for accelerator, 634 million, because that is where there is the most demand for funding. There are 2 ways to apply in general to accelerator or even Pathfinder. There is an open track, which is completely bottom up. So you come up with any idea you want and you file an application. And if you are successful, you'll be able to access this 2.5 million euro grant and some equity investment if you requested it. But there are also specific challenges, which is a separate budget, ring-fence budget for specific challenges. And here you can see for 2025, it was about advanced materials, low emission food systems, Gen AI, innovative in-space services, and low carbon mobility. But that is changing on a yearly basis. So now we are looking at the back end of the year. So there is a deadline which is due in 1 week, which will cover these 5 challenges plus the open track. Next year, there will be another set of challenges, which, as you can see, will be very focused on so-called Green Deal, which is essentially things related to raw materials, environment, agriculture, energy, and a particular topic on fusion. These will be the 5 topics for the eXplore in 2026. Plus, we have this new instrument, the STEP program, 300 million euro this year, probably a bit more next year, which is really meant for scale-ups, so slightly more mature companies. I just want to show you a typical application process. There is a bunch of myths that are surrounding EU funding. So one of them is that you need to know people at the Commission to get funded. Well, that's not the case, because I do not know people at the Commission, and we do get companies funded simply because the way that the funding is allocated is through a competitive process where third-party external evaluators, which are not employees of the Commission, are reviewing the applications, and the only rule is the top proposal, excellence, will win the funding. There are, of course, different criteria depending on instruments, but in essence, it is about having the best possible and most convincing proposal. It's not about lobbying your way through the core topic. But there are multiple steps, and that requires to understand really what is required at each step. For the accelerator, for example, there are 3 distinct steps. One is a short step where you file a small application with a video and a pitch deck. Then it's evaluated. If you get selected, which is the case in about 1/3 of the cases on average, you will be able to go to the second stage, where you have a slightly longer application to produce, which will then also be evaluated. About 1 in 5 will go through to the final step, which is an interview with a jury in Brussels, which will select about 30%. So as you can see, if you combine all this percentage, well, that gives you a fairly low chance, which is 3%. But remember that these are averages. So this is the average when you're not doing anything special, you're just trying to apply, and maybe you've never done it before and you haven't gone through a learning curve. In general, when you get support, whether it's from national contact points, specialized consultants, or else, you will always increase your success rate. And for example, we are currently around 28 to 30% success rate over these 3 steps, so much bigger than 3%. But it doesn't mean that we always win. I mean, even we, the specialists, there are 2 cases out of 3 that will not make it, and that's just the consequence of having a very selective program. This is the way it has to be because, well, budget is always smaller than number of applicants. So what is the ideal candidate? If you're looking at the EIC Accelerator, which is the most exciting version of the program, you really have to have reached a certain stage. So typically, we look at companies which are already between 5 and 10 employees, even if some of them are part-time, who have already secured some funding, the seed round around 1 million, and planning to raise at least 5 million in the next round, because obviously you'll be asking the commission to cover part of that round in equity. There is also a very specific rule, which is that you do need a prototype, which means TRL5. You cannot get outside of that. If it's a healthcare company, unfortunately, that means you have to have completed your preclinical trials. You have to have that in place before you can apply. And ideally, some IPR. I mean, deep tech is generally quite IP intensive, so the commission and the evaluators will always expect to see some patents already filed, not necessarily granted, but at least filed. In fact, there is a requirement, which is an FTO, freedom to operate analysis, which is part of the application process. As you can see, the countries here are more or less successful, of course, depending also on the intensity of the deep tech ecosystem. There are obviously more deep tech companies in France or Germany, so it makes a lot of sense to see them on top of the rankings. Recently, this is from 24. In 25, Germany became first, so it's been beating France, but it hurts my heart, so I keep the 2024 numbers here as a reminder. But then also there are very interesting countries. You can see Sweden is actually number 6 actually here, which is really good and growing, and it's above Finland. Denmark and Norway in the Nordics are doing a bit less, depending on which domains, but a very good performance from Sweden. How does the investment work? It's essentially capital, so it's equity funding, up to 10 million in the regular program, up to 30 million in the STEP program. It is always co-funding, so the commission wants to have a leverage ratio, which is ideally 3 or even 5 in some cases. And there are some requirements in terms of how much should the other company bring, and so on. So a little bit complexity, and it's a new program. So I think there are still some teething problems, and it's very important to be well advised when you are starting to negotiate with the commission in the happy situation where you have won the right to that funding. Because remember, once you are a laureate, you will get the grant, assuming that you're running the program that you requested the grant for. But the equity is another decision. So the commission could decide not to fund you if they don't like your business plan anymore. And so that requires a bit more work as well. A few examples to finish. I picked French examples, but I will show you Nordic example afterwards. These are interesting examples because Pascal is a quantum company started by the Nobel Prize of Physics 22, Alain Aspect. And you can see the funding cycle here. It started with a seed round led by a specialized deep tech VC called Quantonation. Very early on, they got the EIC Accelerator, the grant part. We did in parallel submit also a Pathfinder project, which was more early stage, which they also got funded. And then when they raised their B round, they were able to include the funding from the EIC fund. It could have been in the A round, but It didn't work out. The commission was a bit too slow. And now they have filed successfully with us a step scale-up program. So they are now entitled to another 30 million, which will come in their next round, plus a venture debt package, because the EIB is also providing some venture debt for more mature companies. So here you can see the array of funding instruments that have been deployed with that venture, which is of course a strategic venture for Europe, but there are many like this. I mean, you probably have heard about in Nordics, the amazing round raised by IQM in Finland. IQM is our first client in quantum back in 2019, just even before Pascal. And in the case of IQM, we won the AS Accelerator twice, and then we won the step scale up as well. So of the 275 million euro that they've just raised, 50 million is coming from the commission through the programs that we have supported. But you don't have to be Pascal to raise that much money, or IQM. There are smaller companies. WeLink is a quantum company as well. Started later. In this case, we started with a transition because they were not they were not developed enough to go for the accelerator. So they got a grant from the ESC transition program, which is before TRL6. And then we got them into the ESC accelerator program with an equity commitment. They haven't raised that Series A yet, but as soon as they do it, they will get the commitment from the ESC fund. Third example in chips. This is Visora AI chips. They had already raised Series A in 2 tranches. They got the grant from the accelerator, and then they raised successfully about 3 months ago a 30 million round in which the EIC invested 10 million. So these are examples, but there's not only French companies winning that. If you look at these pictures, the one I highlighted in green are actually in the Nordics, Sweden, Finland, Norway, and you can see them in semiconductor chips, quantum. You can see them in health and biotech. You can see them in AI quite a lot, actually, including in Sweden, companies like Econo. You can see them in energy, Epishine, Modvion, very well-known companies, and as well as food tech, agri-tech. And finally, space and transport. We worked with Aurora in Finland and Elon Road in Sweden. So that's about it for the instruments. And I'm sure we'll have some discussions afterwards if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is I think this is something we cannot too much of. I mean, the ability to navigate in EIC funding is really important for people who need that kind of funding. So thank you so much. Great. So let's jump to our last speaker today. It's funny that Amir is from A2, what's the name? A2E? Oh, A2P. And now we are from A2A. So welcome, Rogero. And I think you don't have any slides, so you can just take it away.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. First of all, I'm Jernström, Senior Venture Architect in A2A. We are the second year of our venture building program. And just to make a very quick context for this, A2A is the biggest multi-utility company in Italy. We have very diverse business ranging from generation and trading of electricity. We have infrastructures like electricity distribution, gas, water, optic fiber, mobility, public lighting, and so on. We have all the, let's say, the waste collection, sorting, disposal, and the waste to energy plants. And we also have, let's say, commodity clients, so we sell as well electricity and gas to the whole Italy. We're, let's say, a little bit peculiar because we have like 99% of our business in the Italian soil, so we're a very national company, even if we have over 14, 15 now, maybe billions of revenue. And we have a very clear mandate from the leadership team, and in particular the CEO, on developing on 2 axes. So we are pretty restricted on where we can go, which is energy transition and circular economy. So It will be taking also from Amir's speech. The sector focus for us is very clear. And so I'm going to tell you, let's say, a little bit what are the objectives and what we're doing, and also the challenges, the failures, and the learnings we had in this almost 2 years. Say in a couple of months, it's going to be 2 years. And if anyone has questions, don't hesitate eventually to raise a hand or write in the chat. So, venture building. First of all, how did we manage to convince our leadership about venture building and corporate venture building? I don't know exactly if you are all aware, but let's say corporate venture building, it's actually made from inside a big corporate, as we are. And which are the advantages, the opportunities, and the risks of doing this? First of all, the big advantage is the change of mentality, of mindset, of ambition compared to the traditional corporate innovation. So what we really try to do is create a channel for expressing both the internal creativity. So we have programs and initiatives so that the 7,000, 10,000 employees can share their ideas for improvement, for creating new businesses. The second one is, which is, let's say, a close match, but also having a structured system method to tackle high risk initiatives. So we are the ones that at the same time can tap into, say, the individual talents of the employees and the ones that can develop, and the risk, which is the most important part, and the risk high uncertainty initiatives. The final goal is, say, a mix of two things. The first is differentiation for the group. So we are tasked mostly to go in adjacent spaces. I don't know if everyone is, let's say, knows the different horizons of innovation, Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Horizon 1 is the core of the business. Horizon 2 is adjacent. Horizon 3, let's say, is a disruption or disruptive compared to the business. And what we do is placing it in the adjacent. So we try to create new businesses for the group. And the second one, which sometimes is conflicting, and that's also where some issues might arise, is that we are trying to create startups. So we're trying to create companies that can be self-sustaining and, say, survive without A2A, but also develop beyond what it is A2A, so beyond the Italian soil, beyond what's the current scope, geographical clients. So we have, let's say, a license to go broader and take more risk compared to the other normal, let's say, innovation practices. This comes out actually from trying to, let's say, reinforce the pros and minimize the cons of doing venture building inside a corporate. Just to name a few, on the advantage side, as you can imagine, we have much less need for external funding. So, for example, we have in A2A, we have say almost 2.5 billion capex each year. Innovation budgets are high. Finding a couple of millions to have an industrial pilot is something we can do pretty easily. So that's helps a lot. But let's say that's just the financial power that could be done from any fund or whatever. What we also have is internal know-how, because we have the people doing the business, the people experiencing the problem, the people seeing the opportunity inside. So we have access to maybe the waste collection guy, which is 15 years doing his job. It's very easy to go visit the hydroelectric plant. It's easy to get in the field, touch the operations. It's easier to connect with the real world, to connect with clients. And we believe that's a very important part. The second being the vertical focuses that we develop at the center also of our overall industrial strategy for the group. What we have is commitment and potentially a first client already inside the company, as we really try to create value for the clients, which could or could not be A2A, could be clients of A2A, could be suppliers to A2A. We have, as we said, we have a pretty broad mandate on that. But it's always something that in a way or the other brings value to the business units. And as such, we have someone inside pushing for it. And also a potential first client. Just to tell you about, let's say, the first project that graduated from the program, which is a thermal battery for district heating applications. Actually, when we finished, we already had 5-year commitments with a certain number of pieces, a certain number of, let's say, in different areas, but with the A2A subsidiary managing district heating. So we can give ventures both know-how, the opportunity to test it on our asset in a controlled environment, and a first client, which can mean revenue streams and stability, which can be very reassuring for the further rounds, for the survival and expansion of the company. Now, the cons that we have, which are pretty hard, are of course the threats to the startup mentality, the startup agility, that what makes startups winning in innovation. So we have all the processes, procurement, legal, HR, all the gatekeepers. So to talk with someone, you have to do first an alignment with another one, the whole the big corporate, let's say, jungle and dance that you might know. And actually, our job is to try to push for using the advantages while trying to minimize the disadvantages. And this is pretty this is pretty hard at times. There are some, say, one advice I can give is try to, let's say, pick well the battles you wanna contest. Meaning that there are some departments and situations that might be pretty quick victories, where you spend a lot of effort, you burn a lot of political capital, but in the end you don't get the full result you were expecting. Sometimes instead, by just focusing on certain aspects, say running a little bit the corners, it can be much faster, and it can create a good environment also in the relationship with those departments, which can make, say, life easier for the further and let's say, going on. The second advice on this collaboration I can give is either you find an extremely fertile soil where you begin this venture building program, so very strong and hands-on support from the top leadership, or it's going to be a step-by-step process. So as we are doing when we do venture building and when we do innovation in general, we don't start by making the big jump to the end. We start small improvements, the risking step by step, and this is the same, getting to the desired state step by step. In a let's say, in a simple word, don't swim against the current, go with the current, and slowly bend it toward your direction. This is let's say, just political things, but pretty important to do corporate venture building. One part that I haven't mentioned, which for us is very interesting and very important, is how we have built the model, which is actually around 3 phases. We start with an internal part, so we're just the venture building team. We call this ideation. I think most of call them ideation. We just find ideas, actually, more than ideas, we find problem spaces, and we validate different ways depending on the one, mostly interviews. We validate the existence of the problem. What we do then is we assemble a team. So we actually take first from the internal employees, and we try to find what we call them founders. We find the founders, and then we complement what we find inside with the exterior part. This, in our opinion, gives the best balance between using the internal know-how, having someone in the organization, which means with the contacts, which knows how to work with the internal guys, and the external part, which apart from us, the whole venture building team has had, including me, venture experience or startup experience, but we have found that also external people coming with a different mindset for the corporate can help transition, let's say, from the usual corporate mindset, 9-to-5 job, to entrepreneurship, which again, it's a big jump, in big corporates even more. So what we would do is exactly trying to bring external talent, give value to the internal talent, and to give value to this internal talent, we are also, let's say, pitching this venture building as a, say, learning program, in a way that employees that come in get soft and also hard skills that are very proper of entrepreneurship, and they bring them back to the business units. So this is also a very important part, because as you can imagine, taking out people from teams, everyone is always understaffed, difficulties abound, projects are top priority always. And so we also have to balance this. But we have found actually that also the managers, or let's say the superiors of the people participating in the program, have started to recognize that the people coming back really have done a switch in how they approach their task, they approach the extra question they pose themselves, and this is something also of great value for the company actually, and for the program, because it allows us to grow a little by little. And I would say, let's say, as a general introduction, those are, let's say, how we work. The last the learning from this year batch, actually, one very important is, at least for us, don't get too close to the business, meaning that if you get onto the strategic priorities of the business, often the steering of the project gets taken out of your hands. So actually, if it's very important for a department, a business unit, a director, or whoever, that project or that theme gets developed, often they're much more used to, we call them, say, top-down steering. So they use their knowledge, their gut feeling to evolve the product and go on. While what entrepreneurship and startupping tells us is the market is the driving force. The customer, the value you create should be observable, testable, and that should come from the outside. And so this clash sometimes, say, also because we are a new program or whatever, but you might lose it. So we did find ourselves with a project for which we didn't have, actually, we did have evidence that there was no market, but the business wanted to do it anyway. And so we found ourselves, and they said, but we said, okay, but let's look for what the market wants. And the answer was, as you might expect, but we are the expert of the market. We know the market better than themselves, so we know where to go. And this is just general advice for, so if you can, the sweet spot is actually where it's close enough to the business to be, let's say, coherent with what they do, but outside enough of the business not to be on the critical path. We call it, let's say, the cherry on top. It's not the cake. If you get into the cake, they want to manage their cake. If you get on the cherries, they might give you support enough to bring it to reality, but no pressure so high that you can actually develop it as a startup.
Great. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. I mean, I'm almost very interested to listen to corporates who do this, because they vary from case to case so much. I find it very interesting. And I can share with you that I think we've had 51 corporates now in Deep Tech Alliance. You are top 3 at least of how to do in-house innovation in corporate. So I can start with the question. So a lot of what you do in your department, in the venture builder department, it should be similar to how you work with the startups that you bring along. But I know you're in the same kind of organization, but I mean, how, do you differ that completely, or do you put them together, or how do you deal with that? Do you have them in different buildings? You have so many buildings, so you can.
No, okay. Just for say the other 2 words of context, in the innovation, let's say, department, there are venture building, which is us, venture capital, so it's corporate venture capital, I think everybody knows, and we also have a venture clienting unit. So let's say venture building creates startups, venture capital invest in startups, venture clienting partners with startups, so mostly industrial partnerships. So let's say they differ much more at the beginning than in the following phases, meaning that the venture clienting, of course, is effective only when things are put into the ground. Often we do co-developments or of course POCs, but sometimes even co-developments. And so it's very important to bring evidence of the value to the business unit to gain the trust for the scale. On the venture capital, we invest only in companies that have industrial synergy with A2A, both for the know-how and being able to evaluate the real value, but also because we give an advantage to the company by bringing it in and giving them a testing field, access to the assets and so on. And this is something we do as well with the venture teams that we bring in the venture capital. The differences are that on the venture clienting, we only look at the, let's say, the business value that the external startup brings. On the venture capital, of course, we will look at both the, let's say, the valuation, so we are gaining as shareholders, and the industrial value. On the venture building instead, we look more at the market. So our venture clienting and venture capital strategy is to find the right person to talk with, the right department to work with inside A2A. While in the venture building, we try to find clients, we try to find the market for them. So there is I would say, an 80-90% chance that the first pilot is going to be internal. So the part of finding the right home, we call it finding the right home inside the organization is very important. But at the same time, we have to balance perfect for the business and perfect for the market, while the venture clienting is just perfect for the business. And of course, the venture clienting is a little bit more rounder. But then I would say that the scaling, the opening to the market, the go-to-market is mostly us, while collaboration with the internals is it's absolutely shared between the practices. So we have actually a lot of practice sharing. Yes.
So you can raise question, any of you. You can put them in the chat or raise your hand. There is nobody. Oh, here's a good question. Question for whoever wants to respond. How are late-stage VCs interested in the later stages for the startups, given the amount of equity European startups give away to accelerators, venture builders, consultants early on? That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just jump in there, I think first of all, you should not be giving equity to consultants. I don't think these are the people who should be receiving equity, and I'm a consultant, so I can speak for them. Then, yes, there is a dilution. I think it's really important. venture studio, venture builders can take a disproportionate amount of shares, which will then essentially screw your cap table. If I take the example of the venture accelerator we created, the venture studio which created in France for quantum, the maximum amount that we will request for a 2-year program is 20%. So it will not go above that. And I think that's quite important because indeed, if you already give 50% to a venture builder, then it's going to be really difficult for you to raise money. In fact, for example, at the EIC accelerator, if you go to in front of the jury and your company is already owned more than 50% by an accelerator or venture builder, then for sure they will not be interested in investing in you. And so that is for us a filter, for example, when we take on cases. But the ideal scenario is when you negotiate, if you are in a university, a reasonable transfer with your TTO. I know there are countries where they are a bit greedy, but in general, that should be possible to negotiate so you don't dilute yourself too much when you spin out the company. And after that is the classic VC process where, of course, at each round you will get diluted. But if you do your fundraising well, you should be hitting your A round still with more than 50% of the company easily.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, however you build your company, you have to manage your cap table already from day one. Otherwise, you're lost sooner or later. And also remember that I think it's the number I saw latest was 95% of all startups die. So this is not about, this is not about that. It's about how to avoid to do that, So you need help. In most cases, it's better probably to use help and pay for it than not. David, you have a lot of experience on this. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think the idea of an accelerator or a consulting firm or advisor taking 20% equity is borderline egregious, to be honest. In the UK.
Just to be clear, I didn't say any consultant. Are you referring to 20% I said?
Yeah.
That is a venture studio. We take the researcher and we are investing
accelerator.
€1 million.
Yeah. Okay. My apologies. Even so, it shows up, and certainly if you're investing at Series A onwards and the studio, it's kind of dead money. It's a bit like angel money. They're no longer contributing to the growth of the business for the most part. So it's a vital part, I think, in creating value. But I think you've got to be very, very mindful of how the cap table looks later on, which is the point everybody's making, I think. A similar conversation around the TTOs that was mentioned. Certainly various university systems in the UK I can speak to had some pretty egregious ownerships as companies were coming out. Around just over a couple of years ago, there was a government commission spin-out review. One of our shareholders and directors co-authored that with Irene out of Oxford as well. We're a Cambridge-based fund, active fund, accelerator, venture builder, by the way. So a lot of the TTOs in the UK have now brought down their target ownership along the lines of the 10U US recommendations, and I think are tracking more towards a more standardized terms, which just make things look way, way, way more attractive. Essentially, all that's been happening in the past is it's been left to later stage investors to create an ESOP for management, which is fine, but it's just creating yet another obstacle. But I think, the most important thing with any very, very early stage business is to have a fantastically validating market and an awesome team. And so anything that can be done to make that founding team as strong as possible and as equipped as possible to take these things to market is the thing that makes the difference. And we're 64 investments in the last 4 years, and I've never had as high a conviction as I has now that it's all about the founding team.
Yeah, especially in deep tech, which is it's so hard to get just throwing people or change people, so it has to be a team. Great stuff. Any other questions or comments anywhere? Sandra, what have you have at KTH? I think you have just recently started with venture building, and it's kind of funny in a way. I think it's kind of funny because I mean, the way I look at venture build is the opposite or the alternative to technology transfers. So by doing both from the university, that's a little bit different than doing it from outside, so to speak. Do you have a view on that, or have you thought about that?
Yeah, well, as a venture builder at KTH, I'm actually not like hired per se by KTH. I'm like still external in that sense. It's like a pro bono thing for KTH. I think the difference is that us who do the venture building at KTH, we kind of want to do it because we're drawn to the innovation and drawn to this building from scratch. And we also have the experience of all this, like having a messy cap table. So I think most of us are quite aware that as a venture builder, you're not really supposed to come and say, I do one small thing, or small thing. It might not be small, but I don't come and I take a whole lot of the company. I think it's more the fun of seeing someone else grow. I have my experience with the tech transfer offices in France. So that's way more administrative, and it's always different when you talk with a whole institution instead of like, as a venture builder, you're still a person, and if you want to, I mean, you can, if you find the right team, maybe you jump on and you stop being a venture builder and you actually become a co-founder. Whereas that would never happen with a tech transfer office. They will always just put the administrative things. So I think, yeah, I don't know if I answered anything of your question. It's just a reflection here.
Probably did. I mean, with your experience, it's actually a lot of experience. I hope you're there still, Amir. Are you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. With your immense experience in this kind of issue, both from corporates and from ecosystem building in many countries, does it become easier if you build a great ecosystem in like the last one you're working on now? Is that making it more efficient to do technology transfer than it was before?
I think universities are developing in different ways around technology transfer. So one of them is definitely the venture builder. I can give you one example that I've learned at the Porsche Institute. They basically, I mean, Porsche Institute is a very deep tech in all ways. I mean, it's energy, it's photonics, it's nuclear energy, and so forth. And they have a lot of resources and capabilities that are basically like the particle accelerators and others. So one idea that came up, I was not involved, I'm just telling you about it, is to create an intermediate company where this intermediate company is licensed to access all the facilities and all the resources of the research institutions. And this company is creating commercial agreements with their clients. So therefore, the whole process is streamlined. It's good for service capabilities, but it helps immensely. And this is, again, just one example of the new technology transfer. Another one, again, from my experience, is basically find a way to encourage. I don't know what is the right name. I call them super professors. So basically, the description is very strong researchers that have gained an expertise in a specific technology domain. And this technology domain is applicable to multiple markets. So basically, they have a specific labs where in the labs, typically they have 20 to 30 postdocs or PhD candidates, etc. And then those super professors, they have an expertise in the technology domain, but they also understand business, how to spin off a company, etc. And then what they do, they take the technology, they find that it's very good for this specific markets. And then basically those super professors take an entrepreneur in potential from one of the 20 or 30 people in the lab and okay, take this technology, create a startup company. They're already connected with VCs and others. So basically it's a partial or sometimes even full ecosystem. And then you can see that from those specific professors, multiple companies have spun off, all using the same technology in the same university. So this is again another example of non-conventional technology transfer, and you are seeing quite a lot of it. And this is definitely an area that is developing over time. But by the end of the day, it goes down to the people. As David said, a successful startup is number one, the right team, number two, the right team, and number three, the right team. So it all goes back to the people. And then you have in different technology transfer organizations, visionary leaders, and then some people that are still stuck with the old technology transfer. So it's a whole world, some of it old and some of it new.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or otherwise, I have a question back to you here, because I am working, I have been working with quite many corporates to support their internal innovation efforts, and one specifically here in Sweden who makes trucks. I don't say who it is. It's they were quite successful with the venture studio, and some great companies actually started to grow with huge potential. But they had that issue of actually letting it go. Is that something you experience? Because I think that's a very kind of, it's almost like the same or the opposite to not invented here. Why don't we, well, this is so great, so can we really afford to let them grow? Like keeping your kids in the basement for your entire life. Do you feel anything like that at A2A? Is that
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's say there are couple of let's say potential mitigations and things we are trying to do, but to be honest, for the moment, part of the program has not that many graduates, but we still have any full spin-off. So actually we have, apart from closing, killing, how you want to call it, let's say closing the startup, apart from that, we have actually three potential outcomes. So outcome number one, the preferred of the business units, is wholly owned, so 100% A2A. Very simple, like this. Second is partially owned, so for us means usually leaving 20 to 30% to the funding team. And of course, let's say, if you put it like that, is absolutely not a liquid shares. So there is a certain kind of buyback given milestones at a certain date. Or the partially owned, so minority A2A, where A2A takes 19.9% or less. And that's made for external investments. So our narrative for pushing for the minority stake or A2A actually is composed of two things. The first one is risk, meaning that, of course, the higher the investment, the higher the risk. And if you want to have external investors, you cannot have majority, because no one is going to invest in a corporate-owned startup, unless there is, of course, very clear upsides. But in that case, I mean, why would you want external investors? The second one, which is actually maybe the most effective, is talent, meaning that if you have something you believe has potential, you really want to have the best people bringing it forward. So if you take someone that approaches it as a corporate job, salary employee, and you might give them ambitious bonuses and so on, but it's still different. And so when you get to the point when you want to have the best people, usually let's say either it's late, so we are taking professional managers, which cost a lot and ask for equity as well, or, and that's what we're trying to do, we try to keep the same founders, which are also the ones that have built a belief, they know the markets, and so on. And so what we do actually is trying to get people who have an let's say an entrepreneurial mindset and ambition, and we tell them, and also works pretty well for the motivation. Look, the venture, if we don't do anything special, is gonna get absorbed into A2A. So if we find a good market with good prospects, it's gonna go there. The only reason why they might let you go is either because it's too risky, because they don't see the potential, or because the potential is so high that they feel that you need the speed of the entrepreneur, or the let's say the anger for success of the entrepreneur to get it on the ground. Let's say we have also, and this is something a little bit peculiar about A2As, of saying the regional geographical limitation of A2A. So whenever we go outside Italy, A2A is a little bit, let's say, it's not on their usual environment. So they see a lot greater, much greater risk. So considering that Italy might range from 1/4 to 1/10 of European numbers, and in the world much less, 20% of something worldwide might be much more than 100% of something is just in Italy. So that's a little bit what we do. Another of the challenges, and this one is we are still trying to understand how to get around it, is that sometimes corporates don't even, not talking about the shares of the company, but they might not want to share the competitive advantage. They might not want to put anything on the market because they say the impact of my business is worth much more than your balance sheet. But actually, let's say in this case, the geographical part comes very easy and helps a lot. But still, there's gonna be always, or at least this is what we found in our environment with utilities, energy in general, is that there is a lot of say less cooperation and more competition between players. So we have always to be careful, also in choosing our clients, and often we try not to get peers as direct clients because that's very hard. But sorry for digressing a little bit, Magnus.
Great. If you don't have any more questions now, I think we should stop, and I'll leave you 30 minutes to do something better. But thank you so much to all the speakers and all the others. I think it's great to anyone who share what they're doing and what they learned and what their failures or whatever is of great value to anyone. So I really appreciate that. So
And
thank you
thanks
so
for
much.
organizing it.
Yes, thank you, Magnus, and
Ciao.
everyone.
Thanks.
Really
Have a good
enjoyed
day.
it. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you soon, David.
Yeah, see you next week, I think.
Yeah.
See you.
Ciao.